An American college student is free from a Danish prison but still trapped overseas. After an alleged violent Uber dispute turned his spring break into a legal nightmare, Owen Ray was released, only to supposedly have his passport seized. Now his family is fighting to bring him home as U.S. officials may be stepping in. I'm going to break down the details of this case, both with a law enforcement expert and a Danish lawyer. Welcome to Sidebar, presented by Law&Crime. I'm Jesse Weber. What was supposed to be a fun spring break trip to Denmark turned into a nightmare for two American college students. And apparently, this all started due to all things an altercation with an Uber driver that led to their arrest, weeks in detention, and this ongoing legal battle that has left one of them stranded in the country, even after being released from prison. Now you might be wondering, how could someone who's no longer in prison still be trapped in another country? Well, it all comes down to a battle over a passport. Owen Ray, 19 years old, a student at Miami University in Ohio, and his friend, who's asked not to be named, they were visiting Copenhagen when a dispute over a wrong Uber address apparently escalated into a physical confrontation. And now, after more than 2 weeks in Danish custody, Ray has been released, but authorities have reportedly confiscated his passport, meaning he can't return back to the United States. So let me take you back to the incident in question. So according to Jordan Finfer, a U.S.-based attorney who's representing Mr. Ray, on March 31st, Ray and his friend ordered an Uber to their hotel. But they realized they entered the wrong destination. But instead of allowing them to simply change the address, which by the way is allowed on the Uber app, Finfer claims the driver allegedly refused to change the location, prompted the students to exit the car and cancel the ride. But apparently this wasn't the end of their interaction, because minutes later, the driver allegedly circled back, yelled at them, and demanded payment, even though Uber's records, according to the family, show the trip had already been paid for. But apparently the Uber driver believed he wasn't paid. Now, Sarah Ray, this is Owen's mother, described to News Nation the terrifying moment her son says their Uber driver turned violent. Again, this is their side. According to her account, the situation escalated when the driver allegedly made threats against the two students. Quote, he threatened he was going to call 10 guys in and take care of them. At that point, my son yelled again, "We've done nothing wrong. Please call the police." Now, what happened next is disputed, as both Ray's family and Uber, the company, give two differing accounts. So I want to start with Ray, with what Ray said allegedly happened. So according to his mother, the driver kicked him in the groin, causing him to fall down. His friend then knocked the driver down, and the two fled, fearing for their safety. Ray's family claims that the fight was actually captured on Uber's dash cam video and is now part of the evidence in this case. So that's one side. That's what they claim happened. Now here's what Uber says happened. So the Independent reported that the driver told Uber that the two riders assaulted him at the end of the trip after getting into a fight in the back of the car, and that prompted him to call police. The official statement from Uber reads, "The safety of everyone who uses the Uber app is a top priority, and we take reports of violence very seriously." The driver reported to Uber that he was assaulted by two riders who were later arrested by Danish police. Any additional questions about the investigation should be directed to Danish police. Now, a Copenhagen police spokesperson confirmed to ABC News that the two had been arrested following the alleged altercation, but that the arrests in this case didn't come until the following day on April 1st, when Ray and his friend were stopped at the airport. And as Ray and his friend prepared to fly home, Danish authorities apparently arrested them after reportedly deeming them to be flight risks. So police confirmed the two were accused of common assault, ordered held in pretrial detention for over 20 days until April 24th. And this is all according to Jordan Finfer, again, this U.S.-based attorney representing Ray's family. Their detention sparked confusion. It sparked frustration from their families, who say that the students have not been formally charged as of yet. And this is actually allowed under Danish law. So in Denmark, according to News Nation, suspects in certain crimes can be jailed for maybe weeks, maybe even months without being charged. And that's also according apparently to the official custody laws on the country's public prosecution's website. But we're actually going to be speaking with a lawyer from Denmark in a minute to talk more about this. But then there came a partial release, and that still left one of these students, Owen Ray, trapped in Denmark. This is a big story. It's already getting a lot of traction, so we appreciate you coming to us for our coverage and analysis of this. And look, I want to quickly thank Odoo, our sponsor, for helping make this episode happen. And Odoo is an incredible all-in-one business management software that provides you with a range of applications, like their Projects app. We know managing projects can be tough, but with Odoo Projects app, Doesn't really have to be. You need a clear timeline? The Gantt view maps out your tasks, help you stay on track. Prefer a maybe more flexible approach? The Kanban view lets you move tasks easily from to-do to done. Or if you like structure, the list view gives you all the details at a glance. Plus, Odoo's comprehensive dashboard keeps you updated on task status, activities, remaining time, so you're always in control. And with powerful reporting tools, you can track your project's budget, milestones, and profitability in real time. The Odoo Projects app helps you stay organized, meet deadlines, and boost productivity. So right now, you can get a free 15-day trial of Odoo's all-in-one business solution. Scan the QR code on screen or check it out at our link, odoo.com/sidebarproject. All right, so I want to bring on a special guest to help me break this down. I'm joined once again by former FBI and CIA agent Tracy Walder, who, by the way, has a great podcast called Spy Girls. Hope everybody can check it out. Tracy, so good to see you. Thanks so much for taking the time. First, let's just start. Denmark, okay? What should we be thinking about Denmark? Its culture, law enforcement. I haven't thought about Denmark since I've covered this case. So just your experience about it, what can you tell us?
Yeah, well, thanks so much for having me, Jesse. I've spent actually a lot of time in Denmark. I've worked extensively with their government, law enforcement. It's typically actually a pretty fair country. I will say their justice system moves a lot slower than ours. So I think that that's something that as Americans, we are probably not used to. I would say that's pretty true throughout the whole of Europe. It's not just like Denmark exclusive, if you will, but they are incredibly fair. They uphold their constitution. The Danes and the Americans have actually statistically had a very positive relationship. We share a lot of information with them. They share a lot of information with us. So they have an effective legal system. It just is much slower than ours.
So what do you think about this case?
So, in my opinion, I believe that there's probably a little bit more to the story. Obviously, I'm certainly not calling anyone a liar in any sense of the word. But I actually started yesterday reading Danish newspapers and Danish outlets because I wanted to understand their point of view and how this was being portrayed there, if that makes any sense. The issue is what it sounds like is the cab driver ultimately had to go to the hospital as a result of the injuries that he sustained. And that's where the arrest stemmed from. The arrest had nothing to do with paying the fare or not paying a fare. I don't see the Danes arresting someone for that. I just don't. This is a little bit deeper in that it does involve an alleged assault. Now, obviously, we can start to split hairs, right, about who started it, all of those things. But it's my understanding, just in reading from, obviously very verified Danish newspapers, that the cab driver himself did have to go to the hospital as a result of his injuries. That's what precipitated the arrests.
It was definitely this altercation, the supposed altercation, absolutely. But the idea that they were detained at the airport, they were detained as suspects for weeks without charges, passports confiscated, is that a typical practice that you've seen in that jurisdiction or others?
Yes, again, we might not like that. Right here in the US, we have a different legal system, and we have to remember the rest of the world is not us, right? It's one of the reasons I love living here. It's not us. And so they do deem them to be a flight risk because they were obviously getting ready to go back on a plane and go home. So the taking of the passport is very typical, really anywhere in the world. We actually do it here in the United States if someone's pending charges. Holding them without charges, they can do that really up until the end of April, which is why you heard them before they had been released, their parents talking about the fact that they would be most likely detained until the end of April. So they're allowed to do that for approximately 4 weeks or so. So whether we like it or not is probably irrelevant, but that's very typical and normal for that country.
As an investigator, what do you think is happening behind the scenes in terms of the investigation, in terms of, capturing CCTV footage, documenting the injuries or the supposed injuries? I guess looking at phone records. I don't know how it works in Denmark. I mean, what do you think is happening in terms of this investigation? Because you have one side versus another side as to what this how this altercation unfolded.
100%. I'm not saying the students are without fault or that the cab driver is without fault. I truly don't know the answer to that question. But that's what they're obviously trying to determine. Their law enforcement, in all honesty, is actually quite capable and quite advanced in terms of what they can and can't do. So my guess is they are absolutely going through phone records. They are probably, I don't know if the taxi had a continuously running recorder. That would be super helpful if it did. I know in the US a lot do. I just don't know the case there. So they're probably combing through that. Also, from what I understand and what's been reported by the Danish authorities is that there are multiple witnesses to this, and they've had to go back and talk with some of those witnesses and interview them very thoroughly. So that's why this is taking 2 weeks. You also have a few holidays mixed in there as well.
So on April 14th, Owen Ray's family announced that he was released from Denmark's Vestry prison. But this ordeal, as we've been talking about, is far from over because the family says that Danish authorities confiscated his passport, prevents him from leaving the country. His parents, Andy Ray and Sarah Bushin Ray, said in a statement, "We are relieved that Owen has been released from a Danish prison following the unprovoked assault he and his friends suffered at the hands of an Uber driver on March 31st. However, we remain deeply concerned that Danish authorities have confiscated his passport and will not allow him to return to the United States, something we understand is unusual in Danish court proceedings. The facts make clear that Owen is the victim in this case, and we urge Danish officials to allow him to return home to the United States without delay." And as Tracy was saying, one other interesting aspect of this case is that you have Denmark's 5-day Easter court holiday, which could have pushed back any potential trial in this case. And our understanding is, if convicted, the students could face some time in prison under Danish law. But the U.S. State Department has confirmed that it is providing assistance, has not commented further due to privacy concerns. But Illinois Senator Dick Durbin's office has also been in contact with the family and the U.S. Embassy in Denmark. Tracy, what do you think the role of the U.S. State Department is in providing assistance here, or Dick Durbin potentially getting involved here?
Well, I think that's actually why they were released, right? Is that because all of that attention and pressure, right, was applied to the Danes, and obviously they don't want to ruin our relationship with them. We don't want to ruin our relationship with them either. And so I think, in my opinion, that's the involvement that we're talking about. Also, if it's decided that they will return their passports to them and go back to the US, they're going to play a role in terms of monitoring them and ensuring that they will come back for charges. But the thing is really what they're trying to do right now is determine whether or not charges should even be filed. And if they're not filed, they will just be giving them their passports back, right? And they will go home. And so I think that's really what the key is here. I also think taking away passports when you have assault or violent potential allegations against someone is very normal and is not unusual. And a lot of this is being spun in a very strange way. Danish prisons are not at all like what the family is talking about. They're quite frankly nicer than ours. And so I'm just surprised that a lot of this is being sort of spun as very unusual and that the Danes are not treating this in a very normal way. I believe that they are.
Is it possible the U.S. will send agents, FBI agents there to help with this investigation in any way, or is that not something that you anticipate?
They have a legal attaché office already, actually, in Copenhagen. So maybe, but the Danes have to invite them in. This occurred on Danish soil. So the reality is yes, it involves Americans, but the FBI can't just insert themselves, particularly internationally, in a case like that. But the Danes do have a good relationship with the legal attaché's office. So maybe they are. But I will say, in terms of going through technical data and all of that, they're really good at it. So I'm not certain that they would need their help to expedite processing.
And as for Owen Ray's family, I mean, his mother's flown to Denmark, staying apparently in an Airbnb, working to secure her son's release. Really interesting situation, but I appreciate you coming on to provide the law enforcement angle to it, the investigative angle to it. Tracy Walder, thanks so much for taking the time.
Thanks for having me, Jesse.
Okay, so now I want to bring on a very special guest, somebody I'm very excited to have on. Never had him on the show before. I'm so excited that I'm going to mispronounce his name because I'm not Danish, so this is my cross to bear. I'm joined right now by Dan Stampe-Terkildsen. I know I mispronounced it. I'm sorry, apologize. But Dan is a lawyer in Copenhagen. He's a member of the practice group on criminal law in the Danish Association of Lawyers. He takes his time out of his busy day to come talk to us about this. Dan, thank you so much for coming here on Sidebar. Really appreciate it.
Absolutely.
So
Glad to be here.
Under Danish law, let's settle this. How long can an individual be held in pretrial detention without being formally charged?
Well, you could say you have, of course, to be put in front of a judge, which also happened here. And what happened? They were released by the High Court. And the reason for that was, of course, that the punishment that they would stand to get would probably be a maximum of 50 days in prison. And you can, of course, discuss, is there proportionality between this thing that you were actually detained from the 1st of April and the actual punishment if they were found guilty?
There's a couple of things here. There was reporting by U.S. media that someone in Denmark can be actually detained for weeks or even months without being charged. Is that inaccurate?
Well, it can happen, but
Can
only
happen.
under it can happen under very specific circumstances. But of course, if you are detained because people feel that you might flee the country in order to escape justice, that could happen. But the reason why it didn't happen here was, of course, that there has to be a proportion between the punishment that you would get, as I said, and the number of days that you could actually be detained.
So what could they be charged with? Because let's take the Uber driver's account as true. Would this qualify as assault? Is that a serious crime that could result in years in prison?
No. I looked at, preparing this interview, I sort of looked at what does case law say about this. And we have actually a couple of decisions where there have been problems between cab drivers and their customers. And it seems like what they would get in this situation, if they were found guilty, would be probably 50 days in prison. That's it.
That's it. Okay. So do you think charges could still happen?
I think they could happen, but if I look at, the case, and at least what has been reported in the media, is one of these classic cases where I haven't heard that there were any third-party witnesses. So it would be very difficult to find out what really happened. So I would, based on what I've learned from the media, and that's how I have my information in a specific case, I think there is a good chance that they might not be charged.
Let's say his family is saying, Mr. Ray's family saying there's dash cam video from the Uber that shows the fight. You have their accounts. What do you think the investigation is looking like behind the scenes, and is there a time limit? Right now the passport was detained. Do authorities have a certain amount of time before they bring charges? I mean, before they have to give him back his passport? What are we looking at in terms of a timeline?
I would say that I think it would be. I think this case would at least come to courts within a month from now. I don't know if there has already been set a date for a potential trial. If that was, but of course, they have to file formal charges. We are not at that stage yet. You can't say that there is any specific time limit, but of course, the authorities know that they have to act quickly in order not to look foolish.
Is there a grand jury that does an indictment like we have in certain states here in the United States? Who does the charging?
We don't have the grand jury system. What will happen is that the police will figure out, is this something that we want to go press charges for? Then they will do that. And then the case will be before not a jury, but a judge and two jurors, you could say. But we don't call it a juror. And they will decide the case together.
And what is the standard? So here in the United States, we have proof beyond a reasonable doubt. What is it?
We have the same.
Okay, the same. Before I get into a little bit more of the law, in terms of the confiscation of the passport, holding on to it, is that standard practice in a case like this?
Yeah, it can happen. There is if you feel that people might flee the country, you can do that. What surprises me a bit in this case is that they were actually detained, because we have the option to use other means. And why not just start off with confiscating the passport and having them report to the police instead of actually put them in detention? Because it says that if those means would be sufficient, we would have to do that. So that might have surprised me a bit, that they were actually detained, because you could have started off by saying, okay, we'll confiscate your passport, but you are free to move around, and then you report to the police every second or third day.
So why do you think they were deemed a flight risk? I mean, they were apprehended at the airport, right?
Yeah. Well, I think they were, I think what happened, if you looked at, the first thing is, of course, that the incident is with a cab driver. Cab drivers are, to some extent, I would say they were more protected, but any offenses against a cab driver is considered more serious than if they just got into a bar fight or something like that with some ordinary Danish guy. Because cab drivers are subject to threats and incidents like that to a larger extent than other people. That's probably one thing. Also, the fact that they, at least an account for what I've heard, that they sort of fled the incident and then next day turned up in the airport. I think if you put that together, that might have been the reason why the police thought that there was a risk of fleeing the country. And they were, of course, also contemplating to go home.
Is self-defense a defense in Denmark? I mean, here in the United States, in different states, it's if you're not the initial aggressor, you can use reasonable force. Is that the same situation or similar?
That's similar.
And how do you do it? How do you prove it?
Well, again, I think what happens in this case is you would, of course, try to prove it by way of witnesses. But I don't think that there are any third-party witnesses here. At least I've not heard of any. And that means, of course, that we end up in this situation that it's word against word. And that probably, in my opinion, would lead to the result that they will have to drop the case. They can't lift this burden of proof beyond a reasonable doubt.
Can they testify in their own defense?
Yeah, sure.
What does a trial look like? And how long does it usually last?
I think this trial would take a day. Because it's not very complicated. It would basically be, there might be some medical reports, if there were any bruises and stuff like that. And then there would be testimonies from the cab driver and the two students. And we don't have pre-trial discovery, so it will happen in the court.
If they're charged, are they then arrested? Is it determined if they get bail or not? How does that work?
No, in this situation now that the High Court have said we will release you, even if they were to be charged, we would have the same situation as we have now. They would have to report to police and their passports would be confiscated until the case has been decided.
If you were representing them or you were speaking to them and they say, listen, when am I going home? Should I expect within the next month that there's going to be no charges? I get my passport, I can go home? Should I say it's going to take a little bit longer? If I'm charged, you're going to go to trial in 6 months, a month. I mean, the timeline I think is key here.
Yeah, I think the timeline. If I was to give a timeline, I would say that we are looking at maximum 2 months, irrespective of how this will play out, because this case will be prioritized. You can't keep people in a limbo forever.
Okay. Well, Dan, let's see which way it works out. When I sign you off and I say thank you, I'm going to allow you to say your full name because I know I'm going to mess it up. So, Dan
Stampe-Terkildsen, but you did a terrific job.
I did not. There are things I do great. I did not do great. But I appreciate you coming on. Really, this is so helpful. And now we know a little bit more about Danish law. We'll keep a careful eye on this case. Dan, thank you so much.
And thank you.
All right, everybody, that's all we have for you right now here on Sidebar. Thank you so much for joining us. And as always, please subscribe on YouTube, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, wherever you should get your podcasts. I'm Jesse Weber. I'll speak to you next time.